So, welcome to the Boundaries event, everyone. It's a fantastic discussion. And the first question we probably think is, what are boundaries? I mean, we're all living our own life stories, and our life stories are shaped by our yeses and our nos. And it's our yeses and our nos that make up boundaries. So, the first thing that I always do when we look at a topic or a word is I think, what's the definition? And the definition that really resonated with me was the one that said that boundaries protect our personal self by setting a clear line between what is me and what is not me. And defining these boundaries is a process of determining what behavior that you will accept from others, but also what you won't. Boundaries can be physical and there can be also emotional boundaries. And for me, it's really looking at, when did I become really aware of being putting myself first and therefore creating boundaries. And that's what today is about. So I will share my story. Then I'm going to ask all of you what boundaries mean to you, because it's such a wonderful, intimate group. Let's all get involved. So mine happened a few years ago, where I realized that I was giving so much more than I was receiving. And how did I know that? I was lethargic. I was tired. I wasn't enjoying anything at all when I went out into social groups. Obviously, this is pre-COVID. I found that I just wanted to go back home. And I wasn't, nothing brought a smile to my face. So in a nutshell, I was unhappy. And it was only by really taking time out and being introspective that I realized I was always saying yes to everybody else all of the time. And I would go on really long walks because I really had to understand, well, why do I do that? And is it working for me? And the answer was a clear, it isn't. And so obviously I started to look into my own self-care. And part of that journey was realizing that saying no is a crucial and really important part of self-care. Dulcie, what do boundaries mean to you?
Thanks, Jane. I was thinking earlier, I was trying to think of stories and, things that crop up in my mind that stick out when boundaries have been crossed or where I might push my own boundaries. And truth is, to go into details, there's repeats of stories. It doesn't matter what one you're going to pick because it happens at several stages in your life and it's how you recognise it. And I said to Jane and Maggie, the thing that I realised quite early on is I knew where my boundaries were from a child when there was trends going on, whether it's something that everyone started to wear at school on non-uniform day. I thought, no, I'm not going to get involved. I'm just going to do my own thing. And someone would go, why aren't you wearing that? Why haven't you bought that? And I think, well, I don't want to. And I wasn't pushed into that. And it doesn't matter how much peer pressure you had or what people would say. I just didn't get it, why I should give in. I just thought, well, I'm staying in my own boundaries over here. You do your thing, that's fine, but I'm not joining you. And it's the same with parties and things. When you're a teen, you've got lots of social pressures, particularly when it comes to alcohol, drugs, parties, dating. Some people start earlier than others. And I'd watch things going around me, and I'm quite an observer. I take everything in and then I make my decisions based on how I feel in that moment. And watching everybody, it didn't make me feel that I've got to join in with things. And when people would wind you up or tease you because you're not at the same stages, or you've gone to a party, you haven't tried anything, I just thought that's your choice to do that. But my boundary is that I'm not going to do it. And if you're going to push me and say you have to, then you're not the person for me. I don't really want to hang around with you. And as Jane said, it's that saying no. And there's many a times I've tripped up and I've said, yes, okay, I'll join in. Yes, I'll give you a lift. Yes, okay, it's half an hour out my way, but sure, I'll give you a lift. Did I ever get the lifts back from someone? No. Have I done it again since? Yes, because I'm a nice person. I think, okay, if it means they can go, that's fine. Once it happens several times, you start to remember it and think, actually, it's your turn. You haven't given me a lift back. you haven't bought me a drink to say thank you, and you are taking the mickey out of me, and I'm going to say no. And it's those repeat situations. Sometimes it takes a while, I think, for you to drum in and recognise that someone's pushing you, or you're pushing yourself, and you're not comfortable with it. And Maggie taught me always listen to your gut on things. If you're not comfortable, or you've got that uneasy feeling in your stomach, or someone's, not quite at that level with the same morals as you, it's okay to just withdraw and say, okay, I'm taking myself out of this, and stick with your boundaries. And then there's also the side where you can challenge yourself and step out your comfort zone, in which boundaries can be good to expand and let others lead you. But I think you have to make that conscious decision about whether it's a good or a bad influence. And it's for you to decide that, not for someone else to push that on you. So that's my take. I'm sure a lot of you will agree on several things and also have different experiences. But yeah, that's my take, and I look forward to hearing everyone else's.
Yeah, me too. Shall we start with Maggie, and then it'd be great to hear your thoughts on what boundaries mean to you, and your experiences in setting them.
And thanks, Jane. So I guess I start from what psychologists might tell us about 2-year-olds. And 2-year-olds, on the whole, start to find out what boundaries are. Up until that time, they're learning to walk, people pick them up, babies I'm talking about, they cry, hug me, I love you, and so on. But about 2-ish, psychologists say, that's when we start to get our independence. And we run when we're told not to, because we're just checking on the boundaries. We will say bad words, or whatever we might do. That's what we'll do as 2-year-olds. Now, I don't remember when I was a 2-year-old, if ever I was like that, but possibly I was too. But when I think about boundaries as an adult, and my own personal experience, it goes something like this. So I'm very clear, probably for some people, scaringly clear about my boundaries. And you will know when you overstep the mark, whatever it may be. If I'm in a situation and I hear bad language, for example, I'm not prudish, but I just don't think that's appropriate for where we are. You will know. If, as you say, Dulcie, we have a gut feeling about someone or something, act on it and be confident in who and what you are. And I still have this probably today, but kind of just recently-ish, people have misunderstood me or misjudged me. They think, because I'm quite a smiley person, as you'd all agree, and I'm quite pleasant and reasonable, I think, don't take that as a sign that maybe I'm not so engaged, or maybe that you can say things to me in a jokey way that you think's okay. And that's when you will find out from me, actually, that's not okay. Because I smile and because I appear generous and thoughtful and I listen, please don't misread that as a way of really projecting your own self on me, because that's when my boundaries will really come into effect. I think personally, my boundaries come from the way my eyes look at someone, the way my mouth scowls, it comes in different ways. I don't necessarily always have to say no. And my father taught me as we were growing up, my sister and I, there was no need ever to shout in our house. Just his eyebrows, which I think I've now got myself, but just his eyebrows just went, girls, or in my case, Margaret, stop. Be careful, whatever it might be. So for me, boundaries from a child, I think I've always had them, boundaries. I taught them to, but sometimes people misread what I would say is a friendliness, of which I think I am, to people as being something else. And that's when I have to really actually say the words no, but that doesn't harm for me to say so. And I'm unafraid to say so. But I will find different ways of going, stop, or I'm moving out of this situation. No, thank you. Not for me. Not for me. That's my story.
Thanks. Anne, Roxanne, Teresa, what are your thoughts on boundaries?
And me or Anne?
We've got you now, Anne Hart.
I'll go for you.
Go.
Well, actually, mine it's very similar to what Dulcie described. And but I think what I would say is being willing to say no to particular situations or people, not something that I found hard, and maybe that was my upbringing. And so I think the learning for me was how to say no, so that it didn't come across in an aggressive or a difficult way. Because sometimes people, they might ask you thinking that they're giving you a choice, but they're not really. So if you actually do say no, they're completely taken aback. So when I was younger, it was learning how to say no in a way that didn't come across as, I can't think of the word, but, that I was just being deliberately difficult. Because there were things that, I'll give an example, working in a male-dominated environment, and the agency arranged an outing to a club that was for men. And as soon as I realized that, and I was the only female manager, as soon as I realized where we were going, I went to see my boss. I said, I'm not coming, because I'm not going there. And I think this is really unfair. And he said, well, everybody else is going. I said, okay, fine. I'll come for the pre-drinks. And so that's what I did. And I didn't go. I spent the evening with a friend. The following day, my younger colleagues, male colleagues, had all hated it. And a couple of them said to me, I wish we'd just said no, like you. And I just said, this is what I mean about setting one's own boundaries, but not trying to do. I wasn't doing it judging them for choosing to go, if that makes sense. And the second thing I'd say about boundaries, again, I'm just repeating what I think everyone's already said, is challenging yourself as well. That if you think you can't do something, so like when I decided to become self-employed, I could have stayed working for global multinationals. I'm not saying that was comfortable. They were really tough jobs, but just deciding to take the leap and see where self-employment would lead me, which I've done now for years. And that was a different type of boundary for me, because up till that point, my entire career had been with global multinationals. So that's how I describe my boundaries.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And it really resonates with me in that, having the similar experience of working in a very male-dominated environment, I think that's when I started to find my voice, but it took a while. So thanks. And LaForce, you wanted to share too.
Yeah, I feel quite an unfriendly person now, to be honest, because my boundaries are so set in stone. I was brought up very strict. We had definite boundaries, so we just had to, well, as Maggie says, your father looked at you and you knew, really, you didn't do anything. But I call boundaries being too familiar. I do not like people, and I don't think I've got great body language, so I look that welcoming anyway. But I don't want you to be too familiar in my space. Or, as Maggie says, if you want to swear or discuss certain things, I'm not a prude, but there's certain things that I think are not appropriate. But you will know that by looking at me. So that's why I feel my body language tells people before they start. I think they sometimes think, do I say that? And some people have joked that I'm a bit like Downton Abbey, Maggie Smith, because I would just look and I think, don't even go there with that conversation. So I feel like I'm being the unfriendliest of us all, really, that my boundaries are quite set. I'm quite old-fashioned about certain things, and I don't want you to step inside my hula hoop space at all unless I engage with you to do that. So, but I think the other thing I didn't think about was boundaries, was how people, like with me with work, I do throw myself into work with the office closing. I would do that, so people will. I think my boundaries have crossed because I've invested more into a company that's not mine by doing everything. But that's my choice because I have to do everything and the overachiever. So that's my choice. But the other boundary I didn't think of was actually stepping out of your comfort zone. I don't like change, so to step out of a comfort zone is a bit, you know. So, but I hadn't considered that as a boundary with the word boundary, that you step out of your comfort zone. So that's my take on it, because I hadn't really thought of the word with the many ways we could use it. But I am somebody that, you know, don't cross there, really. So I don't know if I should be more friendlier, that you would try maybe, but I just know there's, with people I love and I'm close to, you can discuss anything. But if I've just met you as well, I think it's inappropriate if you're too familiar. I don't want you to be too familiar with me if I've just met you. But that's just me. Maybe I'm very old-fashioned, and it's the generation I was brought up in. So, but that's
for me, I just loved your hula hoop space. That was the highlight for me. I think I get that. Yeah, don't get into my hula hoop space. I haven't invited you. So, but what's interesting, Anne, and quite a few of us, we're looking at this topic in relation probably to work or people we don't know. And what we're going to do in a few minutes, once we hear from Teresa and Roxanne, is we're going to look at how we set boundaries within our own family, people that are close to us, our very close friends. Because for me, that's where the boundaries probably need to be set, and it's harder to do that. People we don't know, that we may never see again, and there's no emotional investment in it, we're great at setting boundaries. It's those that are really close. So hold that thought. Roxanne or Teresa, who'd like to share their view next?
I'll go. Is that okay, Roxanne?
Let me see if you're pushing my boundaries now.
I was really excited when I saw the subject of this session, because I find saying no really, really quite difficult. And as a consequence of that, I think the signals that I give out that metaphorically it's okay to come into my hula hoop space means that when I do say no, people will push me, because they think they can change their mind, and sometimes they do. I think I have a really strong sense of feeling obliged quite easily, and also work-wise, I get excited by propositions that come to me, and even though I try to discipline myself to listen to a proposal, to say I need time to think about it and then I'll come back to you, I have that sense of already being obliged to it. I easily find it difficult to disentangle myself. And as a consequence, I take on too much. And thinking about your description at the beginning, Jane, of the way that you used to be, that sense of feeling overtired and overstretched is quite familiar. And I do have a notice above my desk that says "Don't volunteer," because it's not only that I don't say no; it's that I make an offer, as you know, as well. And then what happens is I get very protective of my boundaries. That I've carved out this time to go swimming. I'm going swimming. If anyone rings me, I'm going to get snarly. And that's not useful either. So sometimes I end up apologizing to people for getting snarly, because it's all because there's too much packed into too little time. That's the central issue, and I feel I should know better. And that's where I'm at. And sometimes I'm better at it than others. If I'm tired, I find it much harder to say no. It's definitely linked, because it takes energy.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Teresa. And I was like that for many, many years. It takes practice. So we'll look at different techniques later on as well. Roxanne.
Okay. I think if I go back, I came from an environment where I always knew what the boundaries were. Because again, I got up with my great aunt, very discipline was a big thing. So very loving, but very disciplined. And so I've always known to observe other people's boundaries and be aware not to overstep certain marks. But in also doing that, I was always willing to be very helpful. And it was as I got more mature, should I say, that I started to realize that, well, okay, it's okay to say no, as long as I'm saying no from a loving place and not as a reaction and a force for, stand up and take notice of me, it's fine. And if I can communicate that effectively, then it's, there's no harm done from my side or the other party's side. And I think because I am the sort of person that likes possibilities, likes new things, likes to get involved in things, likes to see progress, I am often keen to get involved in things. And hence the fact that even in work, I've never gone for a promotion because the promotions have just been given to me, because I'm deemed to be the person that will get on with it and do the job. So I've had that coming through. And it was, I think, as only as I got older and started to reclaim more and more of me, I realized that, well, okay, I shouldn't take everything on. And now what I look at is the things that I take on have to, well, match my core values, first of all, but they have to be things that I'm interested in, the things that matter to me. And therefore they're worth my time and my energy. So I am very conscious now of where my values are, because I've paid the price previously when I've been involved in things that weren't in alignment with my values, and I was in conflict. I'm like, why is this here? And then when I learned, well, that's why, it made it so much easier to make decisions and, be able to say no gracefully or say yes happily. And so now my life's become a lot easier.
Wonderful. And we'll be coming back for some more techniques. I love the phrase, as I started to reclaim more of me, because that is really what it's about. Because we have what's called an outflow of self, where we're giving a lot of energy, but how much inflow happens. And then there's the reflexive side, where there's the relationship between self and self. And if we don't have that on par with ourselves, that's when you can overgive into the outflow and not have enough inflow coming back. So thank you. So I'm just going to share another statement, and then we can go into a bit of a debate about this. So in my perspective about boundaries is that in order to place boundaries, and this is with anyone at all, especially those closest to you, it is having the ability to tolerate their emotion when you say no. Because yes and no are not feelings. They're just statements. And as long as we can overcome the fear of them being upset or disappointed, and also overcome our desire to please, because this is what's draining, is when we want to please others. And when we take on their emotions and look after them. I did it for years. It made no difference. What it did do is I kept getting asked for more. I was even called UPS by a family member because I always got things done and on time and ended up exhausted. So, how do we develop the ability to tolerate the upset, disappointment, and overcome the fear of someone else's emotions when we say no to them? Because that's the key to developing our boundaries really successfully. And the force.
This is something which makes me sound bad again, is I'm not a people pleaser. So in our family, when someone says no, there's no, oh please, even with my children, it's just no. There's no justification. My mother brought me up to say, if you please everybody, nobody pleases you. And that's just a wasted energy. And I remember that from a very young age. So once again, it makes it very unfriendly, but I'm just not a people pleaser. I haven't got the energy to do what I'm doing and to please everybody else, who I may not see again, and I don't wish to impress anyway. And with family members, they can take and take. So all mine are kept at arm's length. So that's really the way I do it. Sorry, I sound such an old bag.
I think you sound wonderful. Maggie.
Yeah, I just want to test this with Anne. So Anne, you and I are great friends, right? And say you had to, I asked you for something. I'm just testing what you're saying, just to see kind of where it would take us. And I asked you for it because it meant a lot to me, and you said no. And then I gave you a really impassioned, maybe I cried in front of you. I was really emotional, or I went very quiet, or you could just see the disappointment. Or this, is that okay? Would you?
I wouldn't do that, because I'd interrogate you as to why you wanted me to do it. So I would be asking lots and lots of questions, weigh it up, and then think, shall I do it? So you would never ask me something about me asking lots of questions.
Okay.
I wouldn't just say no, because I would have to think about it. I'm not that bad, I have to say.
See,
but,
exactly.
I would have to ask lots of things.
Exactly, you're not that
Does that
bad.
make me sound better?
It does also, but this is the point, isn't it? I mean, as Jane was just saying, so what kind of approaches, tips can we use? So here is Gruesome Anne saying, I just say no. And actually, before you say the no, your tactic, you told us in one case, is to ask lots of questions before you get to that. And by the time you've asked questions of me, because what you're doing now, I'm thinking, oh, well, I'll answer that question. Maybe when you do say no, it won't be so bad for me, because I'll understand your thinking, maybe. Some way.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that. It's when you say no, it's two ways of thinking about it, because you can say no and explain why, and if you do it politely and in an understanding way, generally the other person will go, okay, I understand why, that's fine, okay, I'll leave it there. But at the same time, you end up explaining yourself. I mean, the amount of times you get invited to something and all you have to do is say, really, thank you for the invite, but I can't attend. That's it. And you get those people that go, why can't you attend? What's better than attending this? Can't you come with so-and-so? And they'll come up with reasons for why you can still get there. And they're not listening to the fact that you've said no. And you might not have even got to the point of saying why you've said no, but they've already covered everything so that you've got to say yes. And it's those people, I think it's harder to deal with, because generally speaking, if you're empathetic and you're polite, I do think people come down to the same level. Same with customer service. If someone's rude, you talk to them on a polite level, you say, I understand where you're coming from, but this is our policy. And it calms them down, and they come back round, don't they? But the people that push, I find you can't win with them. You just can't. And in the end, you just go, the answer's still no, I'm going. And you
also, it's unfair to pressurise you. So I actually dislike if you do that to me. But my friends know I'm not really fun. So they'd never invite me to a fancy dress or anything like that, because I wouldn't be going. So they know I'm not fun. So they know. And I've got great friends who know all my foibles, and they just think, we're not going to ask Anne to that. Or a tribute band. No, thank you. So they don't ask me because they know I would just say no. But I'm not going to go to make you feel better and hate every second of it. Oh, do you know what? I've got more years behind me than ahead. So I'm saying more now, more and more, to be honest. So it's too draining. And also I'm offended that you would try and push me. I don't think that's a nice person to push me. I don't like that in somebody. So that's just me. Maybe I'm just a bit too hypersensitive, but no, I just don't like that.
Not at all. I think by saying no, as you've said, people won't invite you to things. So by being clear, you've covered that for future basis. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if someone invited me to a sports event, I'm terrible at sports, I can't concentrate, it would be a no. If I just make that clear from the beginning, I'm not going to get invited. And then it saves all the worry, all the anxiety of how you're going about things. So I think that's a good thing, Anne.
And I always say, and I hope you had a great time, fill me in later. So I'm being pleasant with it. Bit of pleasantry going on.
I think it's brilliant. Who else would like to share their thoughts on this?
Well, I think I solve part of my family problem because I'm miles away from the rest of the family anyway. They're all north and I'm south. So I tend to be in contact with those that I have a special link with. And funny enough, they wouldn't think to pressurize me or ask me for too many favors. And I know if they did, they really needed something from me. And therefore, I'd still consider it. But then if I'm able, fine. If I'm not able, if I give a no, I tend not to get pressurized because I've given the no, because they know that, well, I've got their best interests at heart, and if I can help, I will do. So I think Anne mentioned distance sometimes is quite good, because people can't become over familiar with you and make decisions for you.
Very, very, very true. Thank you. Teresa, you wanted to share something.
When I know I've got to say no to somebody, I find it really helpful if I stand up, make sure I'm really grounded, and take some deep breaths, and 'cause that affects my voice as well, and just to really kind of choreograph it, and that helps me to deliver it in a calm way, and then to stick to my decision. And I'm increasingly finding that's better than email. I find that when I write a polite email, I find it seems to be less possible to be emphatic that is the decision. In an email, people seem to push back more on that than if I actually connect with them on the phone, or on Zoom. So that seems to be working for me.
I'd like to pick up on Teresa's point about the voice. That's a really interesting point about not only the tone, but as you stand, Teresa, you're able to say no a little bit more comfortably, and you take deep breaths. And there's something for me about when you say no, however you say it, just about the timbre of the no. No, isn't as strong, is it? As going, and of course, no. Is there something about how we say it as well? That just the voice, and for a female particularly, that's, I think, quite something we should think of or be conscious of. That when we say no, we mean no, regardless if the voice was high pitched or low. In that way.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me, is when I'm standing up, I can push my voice lower, employ my diaphragm more. It just has a bit more resonance and maybe a bit more authority.
Yeah.
And to get to the point for me where I could start to say no with no justification, it was understanding that having good boundaries, not only is it self-care, but it provides relief, because the minute the no comes out, you feel relief because you've been true to yourself. And it's interesting, Teresa, that you talked about being grounded, because what I had to do to get to the point of being comfortable to say no, even to write no, was difficult, be it on text or on email to the client, was hard. And what I had to do is I had to go right to that point within me of what is that anxiety telling me. I thought, where am I feeling it? And a lot of it would be my heart or within my gut. My gut was telling me, you don't want to do this. My heart was thinking of the other person and the emotions. And I literally had to calm my inner self down to say, Jane, you've got this. My inner critic was having a party as to why I should do it. My inner coach, in its soft and gentle voice, which would come 24 hours later. So what I used to do is I would wait. I would give myself time, because I always felt that I had to respond in accordance to their time, not my time. And boundaries is all about our time, because it's about, are we willing to offer our time to someone else for something else? And sometimes it's, you know what? No, I want that time for me. But I had to literally wait a day, maybe 2 days, to really just settle inside, so that my inner warrior would come out with a, not today, thank you. What tips have you used that works for you to get to a point where you're really comfortable?
I think, Jane, your point of time it's a good thing. If you're not sure about it, sleep on it. See how you feel in the morning. It's a new day. If you still feel the same, then that is your gut telling you, you know, something's being overstepped here and you need to touch in with that. And things like emails of work, that's a good one. You know, as soon as I receive something, if it's something stressful like a delay or a cancellation, I think, oh, I've got to type back, I've got to sort this out, I've got to get this done. Well, actually, if that person's delaying you and your plans and they're the disruptor, they can hold fire a little bit while you arrange to sort that out, and then you can get back to them, rather than putting your panic onto them and letting them feel that, and then they might respond not in a positive way, and then that just makes you feel worse. So I think it's that management of your reaction and time of dealing with something where the solution comes.
Yeah, definitely. And what about other people's emotions? How do we handle that when we say no and they get upset or disappointed? How do we feel?
Sometimes when I feel I've upset people, not necessarily intentionally, but I've said something that they didn't want to hear, but for me it was the truth and they needed to hear it, and there's been a strong reaction, emotional reaction, I just sit very quietly. If it's with that person particularly, which is how it can work, I guess, I sit and just keep the silence with this other person, either sobbing or just not being able to manage something. That's what I tend to, and I tell you that for me is quite hard to do. My natural reaction, depending on who it is, of course, is to like just think, come on, you know what this is about, or to think, you know, I didn't mean to hurt you, but I have to tell you this, or something like that. And when I feel like that, the emotional pull is just be quiet. You've said what you need to say. You've got to let this person absorb it and do what they can with it, really. And that, you know, it could be, for me, a long time of silence. 5 minutes. I mean, for me, that's ages for a reaction.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Anne.
I just want to say I totally agree with Maggie. That's exactly what I do. When you've got screaming, crying colleagues and whatever, I do exactly that, because you don't want to engage anymore, because you just don't want to reiterate what they've said, I don't think, either, or how they feel. And at some point they will calm down, but it's a very long time you feel like you're sitting there. That's the thing. But I think that's what I've always done, because I can't cope with crying people that well either. So I'm better if I just let everything settle and then we don't engage. And then when they feel better, or I've even said to someone years ago, why don't you, when they've done it in a meeting, which I think is appalling, I've said, why don't you just leave and then come back when you feel better? Because I actually feel better, because I don't want that person in a group doing that. It's not fair for everybody else either. I mean, I don't know if that's the right thing, making them leave until they get themselves together, but I don't think it's fair to upset other people in a group or make them uncomfortable, because it can make you very uncomfortable. But I totally agree with you, mate. I think when you're just quiet and that person then calms down, don't they? But it does feel like it's forever. You're sitting there, you know, trying not to look at your watch. So, yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, silence is really, really powerful, because we all respond differently to the word no. And I'm curious to find out from you all, what was the hardest no you had to hear? And how did you respond? Maggie?
Yeah, when I hear no that I don't want to hear, I go into, and I'm very conscious of this, I can get quite belligerent. I can sabotage things. I can behave just like a child, which is, I want my way and it's only my, you know, I can do all that. I know it. And the way I'm belligerent, even on Zoom meetings, you know, I just sit back and just watch. And I've got my legs spread out on the table, actually. You know, I can behave like that, which is I'm not proud of, but I can do it. And I just have to just say to myself, that is not, actually, it's not helpful, really, for the situation. And not that I don't like being told no, but of course, everything I ask for, I think is reasonable. I think, until you tell me. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe other people don't think it's reasonable, but etc. Do you know what I mean? But I do have this emotion that comes up, which says, "You've not how dare you, but what?" etc. And then, I counsel myself, but I'm very conscious of one of my first reactions to something, and it could be momentary. That first reaction before I go into, okay, Maggie, come on now. That critic, as you said, Jane, the coaching critic just says, think about this again.
The critic comes out straight away. It's like, it's like a personal attack. That's how I've taken it. It's personal. That split second is, what do you mean? And it's really interesting because all of us are quite comfortable in being able to deliver a no. But are we the same in receiving it? And hearts.
It was interesting listening to Maggie, because I think it actually depends what the person is saying no to. So, if it were a social outing, for example, like Anne said, and I know that they don't, I hate fancy dress. I don't run, but I would run a mile to get away from a fancy dress party. But if it's at work, and I think, oh, this is a great strategy, I've spent a week working on it, and then all I hear is no and holes being picked in it. You're absolutely right. Your instinctive reaction is, I'm under attack. But what was interesting was listening to people talk about silence, because what I've learned to do is take that deep breath. Because generally, the person saying no isn't saying no to attack me. They will have a reason. And to turn that on its head, quite often, if I'm saying no, I will give a reason. It might sound like justifying, it might take time, but I often find it diffuses any emotion that they might have. They understand I'm not attacking them personally. And that's why I turned it on its head, and then ask why it's a no, and ask it in a way that they're helping me to understand what it is I haven't done that has led to the no. And yet it doesn't always work, because there will be times when the back of your mind is going, well, that is bloody nonsense, but excuse my language. But I do have to keep telling, if that's that person's perceptions, let me understand where that's coming from. And it might then lead to a yes, because it might be that there's a misunderstanding, or I thought I was speaking clearly, they didn't hear what I thought I was saying. So that's what I've learned to do. And just like Anne said, it's probably something to do with getting older.
Wisdom, they say, comes with age.
Let's hope so.
Brilliant. Teresa?
Yeah, a little bit like Anne. I think I've learned to ask those inquiring questions in order to understand. Something I really have to watch is I have quite an expressive face, and I can have sort of had the kind of what, kind of reaction before I know it, and then I find myself backpedaling, or I think, thank goodness I'm on the phone, not on Zoom. So there's something about being a bit more controlled around that, so that body language is congruent with what I'm saying. But I think people respond quite well to one being curious and wanting to unpack it, and that you're interested in their decision. So it becomes a little bit more mutual. Though there are times when someone just says no, and from the tone of their voice, and that's it, and that end of.
Yeah, very much so. And some of it, now that we know that within boundaries are about self-care and allowing people to take time to look after themselves and treat themselves. When we have a better understanding of the acceptance of the word no, especially if it's very close family and friends, we can be more empathetic in terms of just being very accepting of that no and not even ask for a justification. Because the more comfortable someone is that's really close to you, that can say no to you and you accept that person, the stronger and the better the relationship, because it means that you respect their decision. And a lot of the times when somebody who's very close to us says no, we think that they shouldn't be saying no to us, when really it's, well done you for saying no to us. It should be more of a high five than a what do you mean it's a no. And I think with colleagues as well, and with clients that some of us are going to be, working with, we're going to have to set boundaries with them as well early on, because as you know, when you're working with clients, and when I first set up my business, I was guilty of this. I would do over and above. I would give them 3 days. Why on earth would I do that? And that comes down to self-worth and self-esteem. And sometimes we don't set boundaries, as in good boundaries for ourselves, because we don't treat ourselves right. You treat yourself right, first and foremost. And guess what? Everyone else will treat you the way you treat yourself. So that was a huge learning that I had in my first year of business, that people are very happy to take things for free. But to give for free, very, very different. So I started to take care of numero uno. So we've got 9 more minutes, and I'd just like to just open it up for you all to share your thoughts and any great tips and techniques you might have. Anne.
I just wanted to ask, with me, if a family member says no, I'm fine. But if it's a company or a business, I feel like I'm Woody Woodpecker. So I'm like, and what do you mean by that? And why do you say no? And what else can we? And I don't leave it alone. So I think I need to be taught maybe to back off a bit, because I think it's such a fantastic thing I'm offering you. Why are you saying no? So I feel I need to not be such a in their face pecking. Like a child. I think I have to go like a child, actually. I think I turn into a child where I'm Woody Woodpecker. You say to a child no, and they go, but what about? I feel like I regress into a child. I'm embarrassed to even admit this, but that is how I can see myself when someone says no. But if it was a family member or friend, I wouldn't think anything about it. If it was business related, in like Flynn. So I don't know what it is. So I need help there, I think.
Any suggestions for Anne?
Is it about making the sale?
Well, I'm not a salesperson.
Oh, you are. You just don't know it, Anne.
I'm really not. So I don't know why I get so invested. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Winning, maybe, or I think because maybe I'm quite a controlling person. I want you to think like me. Maybe that's the issue I have. So yeah. But any tips would be grateful.
I think what it comes down to, Anne, it's being the rule breaker, isn't it? Sometimes there's rules in place, you respect them, but you think, I can see there's, movement with it, and they've just been put in place, but there's actually not a reason behind it. It's just for an easier life. And when it's things like that, you do challenge them, because I know emotional no's or social no's, I say, that's fine, don't challenge it. But like you, work and education, I've always challenged. So I remember in sixth form, you had to pick your subjects from your categories because it fitted with the timetable. And I said to them at the end, the head of sixth form, I don't want to do maths. I want to do art, graphics, textiles, woodwork, as many of the creative ones I could. And they said, you're going to be overworked. You can't do it, and it doesn't fit with our timetable. And I said, but if I take one of the academic subjects, I'm happy to take one as a compromise. If we need that on our CV, that's fine. But if I take that and don't get the results just because of a timetable, it's easier. You're missing out, and so am I, when I could get a good result for the school by taking something I wanted. And I said, look, I respect that you've said no, and that's okay. But if it was up for discussion, I'd work very hard and I'll get you those points. But that's for you to think about and get back to me. And they did. By pushing that boundary, they changed it, and they squeezed another art subject in. And I said to them, thank you ever so much. If I don't get the grades, you can come to me at the end of the 2 years and say, I told you so, but you won't regret it. And they didn't. I got top 10 in the country for my art, one of the best schools they've ever had. And I thought, that's it. That's when you push boundaries, and that's when it pays off. Not always, but if you're polite and respectful about it and there's a good outcome, I think people can come round. So I know exactly where you're coming from.
I love that. And I think, as always, we should end on a high. Who else would like to share?
I think it's similar to what Dulcie just said in terms of no, and actually showing people the possibilities, because it's possibilities that get people to think differently, and especially rather than keep pushing at them and picking at them, it's trying to get onto their stage to see, well, what is it they would want, and then therefore opening up their thinking to actually see the possibility of something and then grasp it as their own idea. And that's the other thing. If people think something's their own idea, they're more likely to say yes than say no.
Yeah, brilliant. Maggie?
Yeah, I was just being a bit deviant, really. It was just that I have been known, and I know it, and I do it knowingly, that when I hear a no that I think goes against what is for the greater good of the many, I will take action. And I'm not a union on my own, of course, but I have no problem drawing people together and saying that response was, and we agree, wasn't correct, so we will take action. And sometimes you get punished for that, particularly in the corporate world, when you say to a group of colleagues, we're not accepting that, are we? So none of us will do this, whatever it is we're asked to do. And that's when I think I learned very early on that that's great, Maggie, to have strong principles and to act on when you think they're being, almost violated, but you can't do it on your own. You need to have people with you. And so I've done a few things on my own and then looked around to my colleagues who just put their eyes down as if they didn't know what it was. And it's a matter for me about gathering allies with you when you really want to make a point about the no you've received and you think that is just wrong. It really is wrong. So I was just thinking that based on what Dulcie was saying as well, just thinking too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you, Roxanne, and Dulcie and Anne, I think, triggered this conversation, because it's also recognizing when a no is an authentic no versus one that is to manipulate or to control, because then that's not about boundaries at all. It's about an individual wanting it their way, and sometimes at the expense of others. And so it's when we're using no for boundary setting, it's so important that it comes from that authentic space within us, because how it's received, as we've discussed, it can be, it is emotional. Us hearing no, it triggers an emotional response. And it could be because we know it's being used to manipulate or to control or to stop something. And as you've all said, when it feels like that, it's really important to question it, to investigate it, or maybe even just walk away thinking, you've shown me a side of yourself that I didn't know was there, because I know within that that's not the real answer that you want to give. You're giving it for ulterior reasons. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that piece of conversation. We've got a few minutes left, so I'd just like to open it up for anyone who'd like to share their final thoughts. I'll come to each one of you then. I'll start with Roxanne. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I think the session's been great, so thank you for that. And again, it's getting me to look at different situations and continuously thinking about, well, okay, are my boundaries strong enough sometimes? because I know that in certain situations, as my youngest will tell me, I'm too supportive. And so, having someone come back and tell me that makes me think, oh, okay. And so realizing that for him, sometimes it can be annoying that he feels he's getting too much support. And that's been a test for me as a mum to realize that, oh, okay, you know what? He doesn't need me as much. Let me just back off.
Yeah. Thank you. And Anne Hart?
Again, just like Roxanne said, thank you. It's been really interesting listening to everyone. But I think the greatest insight I've taken from it is time. So I think you raised it first, Jane, when I hadn't thought of that before. And it is a tactic that I've used when someone has said no, and I know I'm feeling emotional, is not to respond immediately. Sometimes that's difficult when it's face to face, and then I just ask, can I have some time? It might even only be 5 minutes and let me come back to you. But yeah, that's my biggest takeaway. I think that's a really important tactic both ways.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Teresa?
I found this really valuable. Thank you, everybody. I think the biggest thing takeaway for me is that it's okay to say no without any justification. That I can just say no and not agonize over the call or the email, and that in itself is a relief to know that. Thank you.
Pleasure. And it's holding yourself to not letting anything else come out of you. Not through the fingers, not through the mouth. You just say that word and you just hold it. With the silence that Maggie alluded to. Thank you, Teresa. Anne LaForce.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I was using the wrong thing there. It's been a great session. It's a word I've never really analysed, and I've looked at it from every aspect now. Everyone's given me a different view of it, which I've never thought of. So it's a great thing to take away. Maybe I'll be more pleasant with my nose, but I will try. And maybe not such a woody woodpecker. So it's made me realise that I can be childish in one area. So it's something to work on. Which I wouldn't have thought of if we hadn't done this session. I wouldn't have realised that I would have regressed into a child until we'd had this discussion. So it's been really worthwhile for me. But I don't know if I want it put on YouTube, Dulcie. Maybe
Thank
if I
you,
could
Anne.
be muted.
And Dulcie, any last words from you?
I think, as Anne Hart said, take a deep breath. That's a good one. And time is a healer. There's nothing that has to be done in that moment, whether it's an emotional response or a solution. You can hold back, think about it, and respond when you need to. And it's best for everyone all round.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you. And final words from Maggie.
Yeah, great session, Jane. Thank you so much for facilitating it and, encouraging the discussion. Lots of thoughts I have. And one is to do with not putting yourself in a situation where you have to say no, or that no is said to you. We haven't discussed it, but it's just another thought I've begun to have, and I haven't formulated any further than that. But are there times, because I think all of us have opportunities of great choice, and if we have the choice to be somewhere or be with someone or a group of people, if we have that choice, which I think we do, then maybe we also have a choice not to put ourselves in that situation in order to hear the no, or to have to say the no, possibly.
Yeah, very wise words. Thank you. And for me, what I got from you ladies today was to continue to say no with the confidence and the conviction, because I didn't realize how many of you are out there that are so comfortable just going, it's not for me, thank you. So that's really added to my little bucket So thank you so much for today. We're 4 minutes out of time. So I'll just share please keep following us across all our social media channels, and our website keeps getting updated. So have a look at that as well. And we will see some of you sooner than others. And if not, at the next Cubes of Knowledge discussion. So have a wonderful evening and see you all soon. Take care.